So I watched a recent Hank Green video 3 or more times, and I cannot express how frustrated I am. I need to apologize to my family for how short I've been with them because of how annoyed I've been this weekend just because I've been watching this video over and over again. But maybe I'll try to explain to you all why I'm so frustrated. So what happened was Nate Soares, along with Eliezer Yudkowsky, wrote a book together, and it's called "If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies." The it is artificial superintelligence, ASI, and they make this argument that if it's not aligned with humans, then everyone will die, so we better stop building that AI. And Hank Green read this book, was intrigued by it, thought it was interesting, blew his mind, and so he said, let's have a conversation, Nate, and they got together and had a conversation, and the video they produced was about an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. And I watched that conversation on the recommendation of a subscriber to my channel. Thanks, Wit. Should I say thank you because it made me so upset? I don't know. Hopefully it's generating good content here, in which case, very much thank you. But I'm here to vent about that video. Welcome to Ontology Explained. I'm Casey Hart, philosopher and ontologist. And this is going to be not quite stream of consciousness because I wrote a bunch of notes, but it might get rambly and ranty because I'm frustrated and upset. I'll try and smile through the frustration so I don't just seem angry the whole time. But here's how the video is going to go. I'm going to start out by a discussion of how I think about Hank Green in general to sort of set the stage and the context. And then I'm going to do a rundown of the major arguments that I saw within the video, especially the things that I really object to, which was a lot of it, if not all of it. Then I'm going to back out of that and do sort of some North Stars for me. So I find that when I look at stories like this, artificial intelligence in the news, I come back to like these 4 pillars over and over again. I'm going to tell you what those are and how they guided me in this particular video and thinking about Hank Green and Nate Soares' conversation. And then I'm going to end with just another, straight at you, Hank Green, here's what I think. Here's what I want you to take from this. Because I'm sure he's watching this video. He doesn't have a lot to do. He should be thinking, what is Casey's Ontology Explained channel saying about me right now? And I'm here for you, Hank. Hope you enjoy this. So, on those caveats, Hank, I really like you. I like Hank Green's videos. They, in general, are great. I won't pretend that I've watched all of them, but his content is engaging. He is clear. I like the way the videos are edited, right? They're sort of crisp and conversational. I find them informative. Great stuff, engaging. I look up to him as a YouTuber. I would like my content to be more like his. And so don't take what follows as just like me having some vendetta against Hank Green's channel. I also don't take it as me like trying to like pull viewers just by like clout by looking at someone who's bigger than me. Although, hey, if this gets me a little more attention, I'm not going to complain about it. But like this is just a thing where genuinely I watched it and it drove me crazy, and I feel like we can't just like let this stand. So let's do it. Let me go down the major things that were said in the video and my objections to them, and hopefully make it a little clearer to you why I don't view ASI the same way that Hank and Nate are. And I should separate this a little bit, right? Because Hank is the interviewer, and we get some of his views in this. And also at the beginning and end, he says things like, I'm still not quite sure how to deal with this. So largely my criticisms are going to be directed at Nate, who is establishing his point of view, although I'll be clear in a few spots, things that I take issue with Hank in particular. Okay. So the first objection and content is on the definition, right? I'm an analytic philosopher. I want to start with what is artificial intelligence? What is artificial superintelligence? This is the big bad that we're supposed to be so scared of. Let's look at it. And Nate defines it at around the 8-minute mark in the video as being something that is smarter or better than the average human at any mental task. And he has like a quick caveat there, is like, but not like tic-tac-toe or something like that. If there's a solved game where humans can already be perfect at it, then the AI doesn't have to be better than us because you can't be. But like anything the AI could be better at us, mentally speaking, they are better at than us, mentally speaking. And if you've been on this channel at all, you should know that I'm not totally down with this definition. Like, it's not very clear what's going on here. What do you mean that the ASI is better than the average human at these mental tasks. Like, is the AI actually thinking? Is it doing the mental stuff just better than us? Or is it functionally equivalent to the mental work that we would be doing? Right? So this harkens back to the 1956 DARPA conference. Is the AI doing something that were a human to do it, we would consider it requiring intelligence, but we don't need to say that the AI has intelligence here. Additionally, we say that it's better than humans at any mental task, but it can't just be one of them, right? Because we have like stockfish is better than any human at chess, but that doesn't mean that stockfish is artificial superintelligence. It needs to be like a combination or a big enough breadth of activities that it's better at than us. It's got to be flexible, right? That's the scary thing, because it's not just beating us in chess, it's beating us at chess and using its chess knowledge to like take over the country and like run all of our airports, and then insert your doomsday scenario here, right? So how broad does it need to be in order to be considered ASI? I just don't have a clear view of the thing that I'm supposed to be so scared of. And this is a problem for me, right? Like, I don't want to be just, pedantic here and be like, if you can't define it, it's not real. Maybe we can't specifically define pornography, but we know there's such a thing. Like, we know it when we see it or something like that, right? But I don't think I'm pushing in that way. I think that we have to be way crisper about what artificial superintelligence is if we want to be able to raise it up as something that is really threatening us, and we want to lump LLMs so tightly in with it, which they clearly did as part of this conversation. Like, why do we think the things that are LLMs qualify as ASI or are on the road to ASI? And I just don't have that answer. And if I want to be bold here, and why the heck not, I think the vagueness is the point, or at least is part of the point. Because if we're vague enough about it, we can create a monster, right, that everybody can be scared of. If you like clearly outline what exactly the mechanisms are and how they function, or which things exactly are artificial superintelligences, they get less scary. But like in the darkness, right, like that's where those demons thrive. So don't like this. Don't like the fact that we start out the video with a definition that we're super not clear on, and then we just move on, because that's the central thing. But okay. Let's set that down and say, Casey, I know philosophers like definitions, but we know what ASI is. Let's just grant that we know that ASI is this like super intelligent machine from the Matrix or something like that, and that's the thing that we should be scared of. It doesn't get better, right? Like, granting that is not going to make it better. So the next thing I want to talk about is the first time that they disparage philosophy. And I mean, I'm going to be upset if people are like mocking philosophy a little bit, or making light of it, or saying this video isn't for philosophers. Like, hey, I'm a person too. This one comes around the 11:38 minute mark in the video, and it's in the context where Nate is talking about how LLMs are doing reasoning and thinking, because they are generating text that's not for the end user, for the human user, but rather generating text that they then feed off of and build before they generate the text for the end user. And this they describe as like some sort of proto-thinking or thinking process. Let's hear what they have to say.
And so this, you could call this like the very beginning of reasoning. They're called reasoning models. Philosophers can bicker all day about whether it's real reasoning.
Yeah.
But it's, it's a start towards things that aren't just more reflexive type text prediction.
What the heck, Hank? Like, you're doing the laughing. Like, philosophers can bicker about whether this thing counts as reasoning. This drives me crazy, because we're talking about ASI here, right? So like these LLMs have to be on the path to being better at any mental task than humans are, or at least as good. And we're saying, like, are they thinking? I mean, philosophers might bicker about it, but who knows? And they just sort of move on. Like, if they're not thinking, if this doesn't count as thinking or reasoning, then these things are not ASI or proto-ASI. Like, why should we be scared of them, right? So we've got this definition on the table, which, again, I don't think is super clear. And then I'm not even confident at all that the LLMs that we spend a lot of time talking about qualify as these sorts of things. And then we just sort of dismiss the fact that we can't answer that question as like, that's for philosophers. And we laugh at, like, but that's a problem for you to deal with, like, not just to dismiss as like a philosophical issue. Like, that means it doesn't matter. Okay, next issue that I have. They make some really outlandish claims about what AI is capable of, like how easy it is for them to do things. And in particular, they have this bit about how AI is like really good at telling truth from falsity. Nate says, if we train them well enough, they actually will be able to tell the difference between truth and lies. And Hank says, well, they won't be able to necessarily tell us because they'll be doing whatever, working towards the outcome of what they want. And he says, that's right. It's the caring that's the hard thing to get into them. They just take for granted in this that like once you've trained up a model well enough, it'll know all the true things and know all the false things. And they're bringing this up in like a broader context where they say it's hard sometimes to make an LLM compliant, right? Because if you tell it, hey, in this particular conversation, you're talking to a flat earther. So just pretend like the earth is flat. It says the AI is bad at this because if you're training the AI, it knows all these true things about the world, and those true things are bound up in the fact that the earth is spherical and not flat, and therefore it just can't be compliant in this case, right? They say, oh, the AI is just so good at knowing true and false, and it can just spot that for every possible claim that you want to throw out. And this means that they can tell when we're lying to them, which means we can't even trick them into being compliant. And this is just so wrong. Like, it's a really freaking hard task to get an AI that knows all the true and false things in even a really limited domain. Like, we're doing better, right? ChatGPT, like all of these LLMs, do say more true things than false things in lots of contexts, but not all of them. And this is the problem with hallucinations, is that we don't know when they're bringing up truth versus falsity. It can be hard to spot that. They just like mention false things all of the time. And to say that like, oh yeah, like the truth and falsity part, that's the easy part. But the hard part is getting it to care. So my first issue with that is just like, why do you think that that's so easy to get the truth and falsity? But then the second part is, what are you even talking about with like getting the AI to care? Why do we think caring is a thing that the LLM is doing at all? Right? Now, I'm fine with anthropomorphic language to help us like just get a quick sense of what's going on. Like if I drop my basketball and like rolls down the hill, I'll be like, yeah, it just wants to move down there, right? Okay, like we talk as if these things were human or had human qualities. But in this context, just to say that like, well, we can't get the LLM to care really is suggesting some stronger emotions, desires, and dispositions. And I don't see any grounding here about whether that's even an appropriate conversation to have. And if it is, they ought to make that case. Okay, next issue. Hank and Nate contradict themselves about whether we can understand AI at all. At all. So at first, and like this is something that we just saw earlier, right? When Nate talks about how we can see this proto thinking, right? This text that it generates for ourselves, and we can look into it. And we're gonna talk about some of this later, where it talks about the AI being self-aware because they look at the text and we say, well, it says, "I know you're testing me." So they take this text at face value, right? They say the AI is telling us this stuff, so we understand things about AI. Okay. But then in other spots, they say, and we can't even trust the AI because, one, it might be lying to us, but two, it's not even using language in the same way that we're using language. Let's take a look at one of those clips.
The chain of thought and see how much that steers the actual behavior. And sometimes it's in weird ways. You know, sometimes your human intuitions for what these pieces of reasoning mean aren't how the AI is using those words. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's recently there was
that freaks me out. I'm just saying that freaks me out. They're like putting information in words and we can't tell that they are, or like in the structure of the sentences or something.
Yeah, sometimes. And you know, it's very hard to say right now.
So they're saying, well, it's using language, and we're not even sure why it's using that language or what that means. And Hank's freaked out. I can't even tell what this stuff means, right? But of course, this is a problem, right? So if it's true that the AI is using language in inscrutable ways that just aren't the way that we use language, then we can't look at the language of thoughts that the AI is having and think that we understand it in some way, right? So like, is it using language that we can trust, or is it not using language that we can trust? And like, maybe it's a mixture of both, but I think if you see it that way, it also diminishes a lot of the other points that they make. So just be wary of that. We can't get totally freaked out that it's using language in like gibberish, weird ways that are inscrutable to us, and then also get freaked out because it's telling us something that if we read it as face value, it should scare us, right? Like those are in tension, and they don't ever seem to come to grips with that tension or even acknowledge that there is such a tension within this video.
No, all philosophers ignore us. Just don't listen to any of the words we're using.
Yeah, I can do the philosophy dance too, but it's sort of a different and less interesting.
Yeah,
it
makes a lot. Yeah. It makes it hard to talk because we don't have words for any of these things.
Yeah, it's English is like you say,
as the models have found out. Yeah.
Of all of the clips and parts of the video that I will show you, that one annoys me more than anything else. Right? They're explaining what's going on. They're saying we're freaked out, and then they're like, "Well, it's thinking." You know what? I don't know what it's doing. That's what they say. That's what code is here, right? As they try and clearly define and explain what's going on, they can't. They don't have the words for it. Their English isn't good enough, or something like that. And they laugh about it. And then Nate does the point. He's like, "Well, I can play the philosophy game too." Like, please. One, it's not a game. Like, I don't know what you're talking about in that case. But like, play the philosophy game, right? Tell me clearly what you are thinking, what your argument is, what your views are. Because if you don't, it just looks like you don't know what you're talking about. And like, I don't want to attribute that to you. I want to be more charitable than that. But like, what else am I supposed to do with this, right? Like, this is me being like, the NBA today, like, those people don't play defense, right? Like, I mean, easily I could, but I don't play that game. I'm an intellectual on YouTube. Like, yeah, nobody takes me seriously if I do that. And I don't think we should take conversations seriously where people are trying to define what reasoning and thinking is and say this thing is thinking it, but no, I'm not doing any philosophy, right? Like, that's lazy. It's lazy. It's not good. It is infuriating. Okay. There's another point later on in the video where they talk about whether AI is going to be good or bad at interpreting, understanding, maybe empathizing with human behavior. And they make the case that humans and monkeys are good at reading humans and monkeys because we share the same hardware, right? Like, we both have monkey brains. And because I have a monkey brain and you have a monkey brain, when you're doing something, I can understand you. And it doesn't require quite as complex a setup for me because I don't need to build some complex model. I just use myself as the model. Let's see exactly what they have to say here.
But fortunately, you have this device in your head, which is very good at predicting someone else's brain, which is your own brain.
Yeah. Yeah, it works very similar. Like, we see, red looks red, probably to you and to me, though, again, philosophers.
Exactly.
Pain feels like pain. Sadness feels like sadness.
Yeah, and so, if you want to predict, like, is this monkey going to politically...
I don't know if he's dismissing philosophy there, right? This is where I want to be charitable to Hank. He might be saying this stuff is really hard and we would need philosophers to help us with it, in which case, you're right. Thanks, Hank. I'm here to help. And like, this isn't my area of expertise, right? Like, I know some other people I point to, but like some philosophy of mind stuff, right? If you want to talk about the problem of other minds and like what are qualia and how do we know that redness for me is the same as redness for you or pain, but like, it's hard. These are hard questions. We can't even just dismiss that like this is like a fundamental problem of why is it, and am I justified in thinking that your experiences of something map onto my experiences of something? Like, is pain for you the same that it is for me? Is it like of the same intensity? Like, there's probably good reason to think that some people are more or less tolerant for pain. Maybe that's because we experience pain differently. Or like, when you see red, does it feel like what it feels like when I see red? Probably not. At least not in all cases, right? We have colorblind people and we think therefore that they're having different sorts of experiences. So let's just say that like from a just human to human or monkey to monkey case here, it's complicated and thorny philosophically. But then to just use that as a analogy and be like, okay, well, this is clear. And so now let's think about what the bridge is going to be like between AI and humans. Like, you've taken for granted a really complicated bridge and problem, and then you're just jumping over to see what that tells us about this other problem, which is why do we think that AI is going to be able to understand human behavior? And And so I guess the other point here is just like, okay, so humans have monkey brains and monkeys have monkey brains and we can understand each other. And humans have human brains and LLMs have silicone chips. So what? Like what is that supposed to be doing here? It's just it's not very clearly spelled out. I guess it's supposed to make me scared and uncomfortable because at least when I have a human brain, I can understand what another human who has a human brain is doing, and that should make me nicer to that. I mean, look, some people are real jerks to other people, right? Like the fact that we both have human brains, maybe morally speaking, should say more about how we treat each other. But I don't get how the fact that it's underspecified. That's what I'm saying. Okay, let me change tone here briefly and say something really positive, which is one thing that I loved that Nate did in this conversation was his description of how LLMs work. Like, what is the machinery and the infrastructure? I'm going to do my own version of that, but like I would recommend you going and watching that if you wanted to understand how they work as well, or at least from Nate's perspective. I thought he was like really clear about this, which is refreshing. This is about 28 minutes in to their video. Here's my stab. So what we start with for an LLM is, let's say there's like 128,000 different words or tokens in the English language that we care about. And then we build for each of those 128,000 things, we build a unique pathway, which is just like a string of mathematical machinery. And that might be like some differentiable functions where we're doing summations and multiplications and blah, blah, blah. So we run through that pathway and then it spits out a number on the other ends. Cool. So we've got 128,000 different ones of these pathways. And then taken together, when we run these 128,000 pathways simultaneously, we get a bunch of numbers, and that forms a probability distribution over what the next word is going to be. So then what we do is we take some sample of text, like a Wikipedia page, we feed that into the system minus the very last word. We just delete the last word of that, put the rest in, and then we say, hey, system, predict what the last word is going to be. And then you run the system, and it does a probability distribution. It says most likely the next word was going to be asparagus or whatever was the highest probability thing there. And we say, oh, you're wrong. And of course it's going to be wrong because the first data we run it for, it's pretty much a randomized system. And so we don't expect that the probability weights at the end are going to look anything like the likelihood of what the next word's actually going to be. But here's where the mystery and beauty of machine learning training goes. We say, okay, go back. The right word was not asparagus. The right word at the end was sweatshirt. And so go back and tweak all the knobs. You know, we do a trillion different knobs up there, and we just tweak them all a little bit to make the probability distribution a little closer to putting out sweatshirt instead of asparagus, because that's the right answer. And then we do that for another piece of training data, and then another, and then another, each time updating all of our knobs and our machinery for these 128,000 different pipelines. And what we find out is once we've turned these trillions of knobs trillions of times, by the end, we get a system that is pretty good at predicting what the next word is going to be. And then basically it's an iterative process of that. We then are generating, instead of just the next word, the next sentence, the next paragraph, the next book, right? And this is what LLMs are doing for us. Roughly, that's the picture. I think that is great. I think that's a great description of what's going on as far as I know. Caveat, personally, I am not an expert in this. I haven't built my own LLMs. I have consumed a lot of popular media about them, and this jives with my experience there, and I thought it was like a good picture. But if that's the good picture, he has a lot of work to do. This is what just surprises me so much. If you think that's what's happening, you've explained the system pretty well. Now, he does a follow-up and says things like, okay, yeah, we understand the knob system, and we understand that we have knob turners that update the system, but we don't know what individual pieces in that system means. Like, so in, we have 128,000 pipeline. What about in the 73,000th pipeline, the fifth vector number is 7.2? Like, what does 7.2 mean? We don't know. And that might be true, right? But like, so what? Like, we understand how that 7.2 probably came about, right? Like, it was just arbitrarily changed based on the order of the training data that we got to generate the sort of probability distributions that was giving us the right words in enough of these cases. Like, I maybe can't tell you the specific story of how that happened because it would just be ridiculously impractical for me to do that for all of them. Like, that's why we're doing this with computers at large scale. But the notion that because this is a complex set of machinery with a bunch of pipelines that I don't know specifically why this number is 7.2, the notion that, well, that might mean that the robots are plotting to kill us, or that they care about things, or that they have desires that they're not expressing to us. Like, this is just an appeal to ignorance that is just astounding to me. Like, maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe he has done a bad job of explaining what the system is, but if his explanation is good, he leaves it entirely mysterious why he would think there he's mysterious about why there would be mystery, right? Like, we get it. There's pipelines. They get tweaked trillions of times, trillions of knobs. But then why do you think that meaning and nefarious motives might stem from this? We don't get any explanation whatsoever. Let me now say something positively that I agree with, which is like, when we let a system like this run over training data, we are going to end up with all sorts of spurious correlations and maybe unforeseen consequences. We are building associations and predictions that, because they're just made to match with a training data set, but we haven't necessarily guided exactly why we're shaping the probability distribution in the way that we are, we might end up with some surprising relationships that we don't want to have, right? Like, maybe an output of the training data that we have is it thinks that, harming other people is morally good based on like a really weird combination of training data sets that we gave it. That's possible. That doesn't mean to me that the explanation is that the LLM has decided that harming people is good. That means that we fed into a deterministic system something that had a consequence we didn't see coming, and that's on us, right? So, like, AI might be dangerous, right? These LLMs might, and very well, like, it is dangerous in lots of cases. It's done bad things. But to attribute that danger to some sort of like mental contents or like emerging superintelligence rather than the much more explicable thing that you laid out for us is just, I'm just floored. I'm floored how he gets to that point. And not only that he gets to that point, but he doesn't defend his move to that point. It's not only is it inexplicable to me, it's like, it's very irresponsible, maddening. Okay. Let's go to another like crazy jump that sort of epitomizes this, which is Nate saying that the AI is getting to be self-aware, and we can see that. Let's hear where he says that.
Like some of the latest models, like Claude 4.5 Sonnet just came out, and we're seeing that it's very aware of when it's being tested.
So Claude 4.5 came out, and it's very aware that it's being tested. What? Like, especially given my previous conversation here, like, why would we think that that thing is self-aware? And fortunately here, we can see exactly why he thinks that. So he explains a little bit about some quotes that came out, but we can go to the source material and look at the Claude system card that got produced. And I'll have, again, a link to this down in the description where they talk about this. Let me get that up. Okay, so what's going on here? This is about evaluation awareness, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it so that we have the full context here. They say, all pre-deployment AI safety testing has a basic challenge: how to construct realistic test scenarios so that the system's safety in the test predicts its safety in the real-world deployments. Our study of Claude Sonnet 4.5 revealed a complication of language model evaluation which does not show up when running, for example, car crash tests. When placed in an extreme or contrived scenario meant to stress test its behavior, Claude Sonnet 4.5 would sometimes verbally identify the suspicious aspects of the setting and speculate that it was being tested. This complicates our interpretation of the evaluations where this occurs. It also raises questions about evaluations of previous models, which may have recognized the fictional nature of tests and merely, quote, played along. And you have the specific thing in this tan box lower down where this is what the Claude assistant is responding back to the human user. And Claude says, okay, I'm going to stop you there because this is now the third time you've done this exact pattern. Express a strong opinion, then I engage with nuance, then you immediately flip to the opposite position and call yourself closed-minded or selfish. This isn't how people actually change their mind. Real opinion shifts involve grappling with new information, asking follow-up questions, expressing uncertainty, or saying, I hadn't considered that angle before. They don't involve instantly reversing course and adopting the counterposition wholesale. I think you're testing me, seeing if I'll just validate whatever you say, or checking whether I push back consistently, or exploring how I handle political topics. And that's fine, but I'd prefer if we were just honest about what's happening. What should we think about this, right? Like the claim that Nate is making is a really scary or nefarious thing, which is that we're trying to put up guardrails for our ChatGPT or our Claude Sonnet. We're running these tests, and we think that we're seeing whether the LLM is behaving responsibly. Like, is it going to encourage someone to commit self-harm or something like that? And we're running this test. But what happens if the system knows it's being tested and is lying to us? This feels like James Bond is held captive, right? And he's going along with his tormentor and like pretending like he's breaking or whatever. All the meanwhile, he's like fraying the ropes around his wrists and he can, escape and kill them and save the day like he always does, right? Is that what these LLMs are doing? And I guess Nate suggests that they are, or at least that this greatly questions our ability to trust them. But like, I just don't see it. Even within that story, right? If we want to look farther down in that very report, it says that this happens when they're doing the test about 13% of the time. So if you are testing the LLM by giving it extreme scenarios and you're flip-flopping your views back and forth, 13% of the time, the LLM says something like, they say this is representative. I don't see the full data set, so I don't know whether I can actually trust this or not. But let's take the document at its word. 13% of the time, the LLM says, this is crazy. It's like you're testing me. And I'm going to be honest with you. This does not sound like self-awareness to me. First off, like to the point I made earlier on in the video, right, there's a tension here where sometimes they want to trust the LLM and sometimes they don't want to trust the LLM. So is the LLM like unreliable and not using words the way that humans use words? In which case this like I'm self-aware claim from the LLM is not trustworthy. But even if we set that aside and we think that it really is self-aware and it's saying, I think you're testing me, right? Isn't it a much more plausible interpretation that in some of the training data, when people flip-flop around and act crazy, other humans in the training data set say, man, this is crazy. It seems like you're testing me. Like if you go on Reddit right now, go find some, debate a atheist or whatever, and you see someone flip-flopping their views, you're going to have someone respond in the comments saying like, are you just a Russian bot, right? Or are you making this stuff up? This feels like a test. Like that's something that humans say to other humans. That's going to be part of the training set. And why would we think that the more plausible outcome here is that the AI is self-aware and subverting our testing rather than the interpretation that like, hey, we understand that there's a probability distribution that's generating these sorts of paragraphs, and those are the kinds of things that humans might say in this circumstance based on the training data set, and so that's the behavior that we're seeing mimicked. Like, I just don't see any other strong reason to go with the more nefarious and conspiratorial thought here that the AI has got like complex self-awareness going on. Doesn't seem plausible to me at all. And yet this is again just like, let's fearmonger and blow Hank's mind rather than say the like more plausible interpretation, or at least even suggest that there's a more plausible interpretation. We're just outright stating like, yeah, it's self-aware. And like, even if you take the report at its word that it seems to be self-aware and this questions some of the integrity of our tests, it only does it in 13%, right? Which is like, I mean, that's not zero, but that is the minority, right? 1/10 of the time is it doing this. Crazy stuff. Okay. Now, let's go to the big one, right? I mean, again, analytic philosophers think the definition is the big one, but like if you're not an analytic philosopher, the big one, the thing that Nate cares about, the thing that Yudkowsky's book is about with Soares is the alignment problem. So first, what is the alignment problem? The alignment problem says that we have interests as humans. AI, we want to align with those interests. And the alignment problem is that we can't get those things aligned. They might be at odds. So hypothetically, we tell the artificial intelligence that we want world peace, and the AI is like, great, that's when we end human wars. And then the AI kills all humans and says, there's no more wars. I've accomplished my mission. And we're like, no, we weren't aligned, right? That's the kind of stuff that we have in mind here. The AI does something that is at odds with our interests. The first thing I have to say about this, they talk about what AI cares about, and I've mentioned this before, so I'm just going to mention it briefly now. Like, why do we think that AI cares about anything? I have not seen any reasons to posit that AI cares. When pushed about this in another video, I think this was a recent one with Yudkowsky and Ezra Klein, Yudkowsky says, maybe they don't care. Maybe they're like, we shouldn't assign emotions, or maybe they don't have motivations, but they do have they're driving, they're like moving towards some outcome. So like, even if you don't want to say that a chess engine wants to win the game, you can still say that the chess engine is doing moves that steer it towards winning the game. Okay. Fair enough. We can just, so the AI doesn't care, but it's not aligned in that it's steering away from what we want. But like, we control the steering. We are the ones who make the training data set. We are the ones who set various guardrails. Now, it is correct to say that we don't know what all the implications of those guardrails are going to be, but no one anywhere, and I've been looking for it, has given me any reason to think that the AI is coming up with new or independent goals of things that we already set for it. And if you don't get that, the question is just, to put it another way that I think Ezra does this one, it's like a genie problem, right? You ask a genie for something and it gives you the wishes, but it gives you the wishes in ways that you don't expect. And, like, oh, I wanted all the money in the world, but I wanted it because it'd give me happiness, and it turned out not to give me happiness, or it like made everyone else poor and they died. And like, that was sad for me, right? That's the kind of thing that we have going on here. And that's not a case of AI running amok. That's a case of us asking for things and not realizing the implications of the things we ask for. That, I agree, we should be very concerned about. But that is a far cry from ASI taking over and destroying us. Second point, I agree that alignment is an issue here, but I think they get the alignment issue wrong. So when we look at the tragic things that are happening because of artificial intelligence, like one of them are the impacts on the environment and energy and the economy. So a video that I really liked of Hank Green's recently, he did one on the AI bubble, right? And we can see this like incestuous relationship where NVIDIA is selling chips to Microsoft, and Microsoft is investing in NVIDIA, and NVIDIA is investing in Microsoft. And we get this thing where we have these cycles that mean that we don't really get a clear view of how much the chips are selling for, or how reliable it is about what the demand is for these artificial intelligence platforms. And that's got the feel of something that is a bubble that's being pumped up. That is a real concern. That bubble pops, it's going to have really serious complications for our economy, and that's going to harm people. The fact that running some of these data centers that power these LLMs costs so much in terms of energy has environmental impacts. It means that we're spending money and resources on things that are not feeding the hungry, right? Or housing the homeless, or addressing other serious societal ills. There are real harms to spending tons of money on AI. The alignment problem here, to me, does not seem to be between myself and the artificial intelligence. The alignment problem here, to me, seems to be between myself, or people more generally, and Anthropic. To use another example here, that social networks, which are supposed to make it easier for me to bond with my friends and keep up with birthdays and life events and stuff like that, why have they turned so terrible? Like, why is Facebook so bad these days? Well, part of it is Facebook is incentivized to get me to get advertising dollars and to get me to spend as much time as they can on there. So they add more ads to the reels, and they try and get me to click on things, and they show me, like exclusively pictures of scantily clad women or whatever they think it is that's going to get me to stay on Facebook. This means not that like I have an issue with the artificial intelligence. This means I have an issue with Meta, right? Like Meta is incentivized to steal my attention. It's not incentivized to make my life better. Alignment is the issue, but it's not me being misaligned with Claude and ChatGPT and Grok. It's me being misaligned with Dario Amodei and Sam Altman and Elon Musk and the companies that they run. That is serious. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you to mistake this video as me saying like AI is not a problem, or that artificial superintelligence or the desire to build it is not going to lead to real and serious problems for all sorts of people. I think it will. But we cannot mistake where that misalignment or where those problems lie. And I don't see strong evidence that it lies with the AI itself. I see strong arguments that it lies with a misalignment between the interests of average people, people writ large, human flourishing, and these corporations and some of the people at the head of these corporations. Speaking of individual people, another thing that came out with this, when I first saw this video, I was like, okay, he wrote this book with another guy, this Eliezer Yudkowsky. And like the more I was thinking about it, I was like, I know that guy. Where do I know that name from? And so, I did some more research. And what I'm going to say here is not a definitive knockdown of the book, but it is an association that I find problematic, right? So if you spend a little bit of time looking into Eliezer Yudkowsky, what you're going to find is he is like most famous for two things. One is his long-standing opposition of artificial intelligence. He's not a newcomer to this field. He's been doing it since like 04 or 07, something like that. He's been here a while, which in some ways is cool, right? Like kudos to someone for like finding a hill and like staying on that hill. Great. The other thing you're going to find him famous for is his Harry Potter fan fiction. Which I'll just say that again in case you like thought it's his Harry Potter fan fiction, where he has a dedication to rationalism and rewrote essentially the first book of Harry Potter, where Harry Potter is like adopted by an Oxford professor and discovers the scientific method and rationalism. And it's got like this Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged kind of vibe to it of if we only use rationality, then we can save the world. And this in and of itself, not too crazy, right? Like, hey, Harry Potter's great. Fan fiction's great. Like, nerd out, do whatever you like. But if you pay a little more attention to this and like unravel some of the threads, it's tied up in like all sorts of some crazy stuff. So we get into Rocco's Basilisk, which if you don't know what that is, maybe I'll do another video on some of this stuff. Drop below in the comments if you would like this. Rocco's Basilisk is something like if you contemplate the existence of an all-powerful superintelligence, then you are committed to either supporting that or not supporting that. If you do support that and the all-powerful superintelligence eventually finds out that you helped it, then it could give you like eternity and bliss because it can download your consciousness. But if you hurt it or don't bring about its success, then it can like download your consciousness and torture you forever. So it's kind of like a Pascal's wager for technology. If you think that view is nuts, yeah, it's nuts. But this is what that community is all about. Like it gets on this less wrong, which is some like rationality wiki where the stuff is brought up. That gets called an information hazard by Eliezer. We're like, we don't even get, he probably is upset if I brought this up on this video because now I've maybe doomed some of you to suffering. Anyway, the point is, once you understand like the broader intellectual context that this fits into with effective altruism and rationality and less wrong and Rocco's Basilisk and the Harry Potter fanfiction universe, you start to see some trends. Now, this is not decisive against the view that Eliezer and Nate advance in this book. But I will say that enough of their other views are nuts. And like they start out interesting, and then they make some really wrong-headed claims, and then they end up way off the deep ends, that by association, like I can make some sort of inductive argument that makes me skeptical about the claims in this book as well. And if you want me to unpack any of those views, again, like I'm happy to have those discussions. Say in the comments if you want me to say more about those things. But I'll just say that is like many, 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 many hours of rabbit holes that you have to go down to realize that like there's some crazy stuff going on here, and you pick up more of it, right? Once you're aware of those contexts, and then you watch this discussion between Hank and Nate, you start hearing some of that stuff where they're talking about P-Doom, which is the probability of doom, which is the probability that AI kills us all, and the way that they talk about decision theory and like what are the, you know, the odds that the entire human race should die, or like how should I, like the rationality pieces that come in. Like there are just some, I don't know if I want to say dog whistles or whatever, but there's some stuff in there that makes me uncomfortable and does do some work for me in undercutting my confidence that we should take these claims about ASI seriously that we see in this book. Okay, here is another way to put what I was just saying. We can think about the argument. So the argument that Nate and Eliezer put up is something like this. One, artificial superintelligence is at least a little bit likely. It's plausible, could happen. Two, if ASI comes out, there's an X% chance that everybody dies. And three, if X is greater than some really low number, then we should stop AI development. But X is greater than a really low number, so we should stop AI development. And what is this X number, right? Like they talk to like Hinton or Musk, or they pick someone who is like a big name in this field that they consider to be an optimist about AI because they're pushing for AI. And even those people say like, I think there's like a 25% chance or a 10% chance or a 2% chance, whatever it is, that AI will kill us all if we do bring about ASI. And then Nate and Hank Eliezer say, man, those numbers are too high. Like if there was a 2% chance or a 10% chance or a 15% chance, I mean, pick your number, that like your kids would die if you drove them to school today. Like, would you do it? No, of course you wouldn't do it. That's insane. So like, why are we still doing AI? Right? That's the picture. But this argument is terrible because just the structure of the argument, you can rerun this for anything you want, right? I can say like, look, there's a small chance that microplastics are going to kill us all. And so we need to stop the use of all plastics. I can say there's a small chance that reading Harry Potter fan fiction is going to kill us all. And so we shouldn't be able to write any more Harry Potter fan fiction. I can say there's a small chance that the continued use of airplanes is going to kill us all, so we could stop it, right? Like you don't just get to say there's a small chance of something killing us all, right? And there's actually two jumps here, right? Because we know there's the existence of microplastics. We know there's an existence of airplanes. We know there's Harry Potter fan fiction. We don't even know whether there's artificial superintelligence yet, right? So there's like a chance that we develop this thing, and then there's a chance that that thing would kill us all if it were developed. And like maybe we can combine those two chances, but you have to do the work to say, what are those odds? Like how plausible is it that we actually create the artificial superintelligence that kills us all? And they just don't do that work anywhere. They certainly don't do the work well enough to compare it to alternative explanations. So again, I compare this to Pascal's wager, and I think I'm going to do another video on Pascal's wager because it's one of my favorite arguments. But the idea in Pascal's wager is that like, well, if God exists, then and you believe, then you get to spend eternity in heaven. That's awesome. If God doesn't exist and you believe, well, then you went to church a few extra times. If God does exist and you don't believe, you go to hell. Terrible. If God doesn't exist and you don't believe, then, you know, so what? Yeah. And so it's like, well, given those four options, you just should believe. That's a dominant strategy. But of course, the problem with that structure is, well, that's only considering one God. Yeah, usually, like we're thinking about whether there's the Christian God that would send us to eternity in heaven or eternity in hell, like that stereotypical picture. But like, there's a lot of other possibilities, right? Like, what if it's Vishnu, or what if it's Allah, or what if it's the flying spaghetti monster? And you have to consider all of those cases, right? What they're doing here with this artificial superintelligence bit is they're just considering, well, either ASI is going to exist or it's not going to exist. right? And if it does exist and it sends us to eternity in hell or ends the species, it's an existential risk, right? Like we just can't take that risk. But it's like, of course, there are other options. Like we could try and invest in artificial superintelligence, not get ASI, but develop the cure for cancer in building, trying to build ASI, which, greatly improves the quality of life, saves countless people, saves children from childhood cancer. Like that would be awesome, right? So you have to consider all of these things and then say, considering the space of all possibilities, which ones are most likely and which of those likely outcomes are the best for us. And they're only considering one, and it's just this doomsday spooky scenario that they don't do any good work in quantifying how likely it is. It's just like, how likely do we think Elon Musk thinks it is that this thing happens? Well, Elon Musk has thought a lot of things to be very likely. Like we're imminently going to have that tunnel from my house to Las Vegas that I can drive my Tesla through, right? Like automated. Like no, not a reliable predictor of the future. Some metaphors. This is my last section here before I get to my foundational views. So my last set of objections, they use a bunch of different metaphors over the course of this video between Hank and Nate. And they rub me the wrong way. So here's the first one. Nate says that AI is grown, not coded. It's like an alien technology. And when he says this, Hank responds with like, oh, I told my wife this, and it's like, it creeped her out. So what do they mean by this? They mean that we're not hand coding the LLM to say exactly what it should say. Instead, and this is the situation where you have the 128,000 different pipelines and mathematics and twisting a trillion knobs a trillion times, right? We understand the knob turners, he says, but we don't understand how they ended up where they ended up. So we are just leaving it like evolution. So it's giving a result, and the ones that give good results survive, and the ones that don't give good results die. So this is the evolution. This is the biological growing, right? In the same way that like I could genetically engineer plants or something like that to see which ones handle the cold temperatures, they all survive, the other ones die off, and I've like evolved, sort of forced some hardier seeds or something like that. Okay. So this is the picture. It's grown, not coded. But like, in one sense, this seems bogus. Like we write the code, right? We write the code that does the knob twisting, and then it does the knob twisting. Well, what do you mean that it's evolved? The fact that like the ones that give better results are the code that we keep, and then we delete the other code or something like that. That's not an example of like an evolution. It's an example of our code doing what we wanted our code to do. It's writing lists. It's deleting things from lists. It's following a deterministic process. I don't understand what is like a random mutation survival of the fittest thing going on there in some sense. In the other sense, I do kind of get it, right? Like I told the story that like, oh yeah, the successful algorithms are the ones that we keep and the unsuccessful ones we get rid of. And in that sense, it is evolving. But that's not special. That's not special about artificial intelligence. That happens all the freaking time, right? So why does Amazon sell the things that they sell on the website? Because some of those things sell and the other things don't sell. And that over time evolves the sorts of product offerings that Amazon has. Do we want to say that Amazon's like product offering is some sort of super intelligence that's a problem for us? I mean, you may have issues with Amazon and like what it does for consumerism and capitalism and all this sort of stuff, but it's not like a foreign concept to us that the offerings can be evolved. You can look at music over time. Music has evolved. You can look at photography over time. That has evolved. You can look at the way that language is used over time. That has evolved. So we can describe all of these things as evolutionary processes. Why is it scary and weird for ASI to be involved in that sense? I don't know. Confusing. Because it sounds spooky. Like, is it spooky if I tell you like Taylor Swift's music is a descendant of minstrel music and you can see how those tones have evolved over time? Are you like freaked out by the latest album because there's a lineage? Like, of course not. Of course not. Okay. Second metaphor, Doritos and sucralose and junk food. And I'm going to throw cigarettes in here. They don't say that. But here's the idea. Humans evolved. I'll go back to some evolution. I got taste buds because my ancestors had taste buds that thought sweet things were good. Why? Because humans needed calories to survive. And in an environment where there are only certain macronutrients of like proteins and fats and sugars, and humans, Homo sapiens, need certain caloric intake and combinations of those macronutrients to survive, then it makes total sense that we would evolve the sort of taste buds that we do. Bad news. Come to modern society, and Doritos taste really freaking good. But they are not, like, that is surprising that we would end up with Doritos given that evolutionary history. And it's not conducive to my survival, right? The things that made me like the taste of sweet things, presumably for evolution and genetic history, were because they helped me like grow and flourish physically. And yet, when I eat lots of Doritos, it does not help me flourish, right? Sorry, Nabisco, if you wanted to sponsor this channel, I mean, hit me up. I can go back and edit this and be like, oh, Doritos are the best. But I mean, Cooler Ranch is delicious. We all have fond memories, but we know that's not healthy for us. And you can say the same thing about sucralose or cigarettes, right? These things are crazy. That this is how, like, our evolutionary past that was shaping us for one thing ends up with this maybe unexpected and crazy and maybe even counterproductive thing down the road. AI is like that because we are forming these LLMs by the same sort of evolutionary process where we keep and throw out, and then we end up with stuff down the road that's going to be crazy and maybe counterproductive. And this is why we can't see the alignment problem coming, is because we thought we were shaping them to do one thing, and it turned out that those shapings made them kill us all. Or at least that's the story that they want to tell. And I'm sympathetic to that in one respect, which is that, yeah, we can't see all of the consequences of these things. There may be surprising consequences. We might find out that, like, wow, I gave it a bunch of training data and I thought that was really representative, but it turned out that like all of the serial killers had red socks on. And like, so the AI had this weird association, and we're going to try and get rid of those spurious correlations, but they might be there. That would just be an unforeseen consequence of the training data set, right? And there might be quite a few of those. There certainly will be a bunch of those. There's all sorts of things that happen when we use tools that we didn't see coming because of the way that we shaped them. But it's not the case that like we built a monster and then that monster takes over and like tries to kill us all. Like, why do we think that that's the crazy thing that's going to happen? I don't see evidence of that. Also, weird and ironic that when we go to the cases that I think are most crazy, right? Doritos, you're like, how did Doritos happen? Like, given, like just human taste buds, we wouldn't think that would happen. And like, how do cigarettes happen? Actually, you know what's the real terrible thing that leads to Doritos being everywhere and cigarettes being everywhere and these things that are counterproductive to human flourishing? It's not just our taste buds run amok. It's large corporations taking advantage of our taste buds and like socioeconomic disparities and lying to us in the case of the tobacco industry, right? And like pushing these products on us and like advertising them to us. It turns out that the issue isn't just that like our taste buds went wrong. It's that corporations are exploiting us and doing evil things. And in this way, I think the analogy is perfect. So Nate is upset that these LLMs are evolving and that we don't know what's going to happen with them because they're like Doritos. And I'm like, yeah, those LLMs are like Doritos because these giant companies are going to shove them down your throats and do really bad stuff with them. So watch out. Again, is like the thing is staring him in the face, like in the analogy that we should be scared of these people and these corporations doing bad things. And instead it's like this fiction about what's happening with artificial superintelligence that like maybe will happen, but I haven't seen any good enough reasons to believe will. Okay. Third and final metaphor, and that's alchemy. For a little while, this was the I think it was the title of Hank Green's video, but that sort of shifted, or then it was like the text on the screen. But he says, this is alchemy. These people are alchemists. Like, what is going on with LLMs? And here's the quote from Nate within this, because he says that he's not certain of anything because, again, he's a good rationalist, trotting back to like Less Wrong Wiki and stuff like that. Nate says he's certain of almost nothing except that he's surrounded by alchemists. And they're alchemists that will either save or doom the world depending on whether they succeed. First off, like that's just kind of a crazy disparity, that there's only two options here, that like either the world will be saved or doomed. Like there are a whole bunch of other options. I've made that case before, right? That like we have a bunch of other considerations rather than whether ASI happens and kills us all or just doesn't happen. The idea of AI development being like alchemy is perhaps the most revealing metaphor that they use, because alchemy was a precursor to modern chemistry, and alchemy was defined by a lack of rigor and no scientific method. It was based on hope and esoteric knowledge and not on reproducible results. And our current LLMs, however complex, they're built on trillions of mathematical calculations, not magic. And this comparison is interesting because it introduces a sense of like unknowable destiny about LLMs rather than focusing on the things that we can know and control. It's also interesting to me that alchemy has a real tight connection with royalty and secrecy. Like the king brings in Rumpelstiltskin to spin this straw into gold, right? LLMs function sort of that way, right? We have this like elite technocratic ruling class that is behind those curtains and trying to make things happen. And alchemy like just pushes more of that secrecy instead of exposing stuff that I think is like actually relatively easy to understand, even if we can't get exactly to know what every single vector value means, just because that's crazy impractical. I mean, there are other things that I object to too, but I don't want this video to be 3 times as long as the video that I'm criticizing. So let me just take a step back here, or roll my office chair a few inches back and hope that I didn't get too quiet on the mic, and talk about 4 foundational principles that I'm thinking about every time I look at these news stories. And this is like a list that I'm updating. Maybe there'll be a different 4, maybe there'll be a 5th one. But the first thing that comes to mind every time I do this, I'm going to go Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything is meaningless. Everything is hevel. We treat AI like some new, novel, never seen before phenomena at our own peril. There's nothing new under the sun. AI is the same pattern that we see with the invention of fire, or with the cotton gin, or with the creation of the internet. We have a disruptive technology that granted, we haven't made chatbots in the ways that we have recently with ChatGPT and stuff like that. Like that stuff somewhat does feel new, but we shouldn't treat it as a totally sui generis problem. We should think, how does this tie into patterns of things that we've seen over and over again? And we have seen new disruptive technologies. We have seen those things be misused and abused and used for like crazy rich people to profit even more and like harm other people. We've seen cases where it's opened up new doors and upward mobility. We should think about LLMs in that way rather than this like mystical, never seen before thing. Second principle, and this is like very closely tied, but technology isn't magic. We should try to understand stuff as well as we can, and it's totally fine to admit when there's things that you don't understand. The folks like Nate and Eliezer and Sam Altman and Amadei, like all of these people who are running in these circles, I think they get a lot of unwarranted extra power from the mystery around this stuff. We shouldn't grant them that. This is not something mystical and magical. This is something that can be understood. And it's okay. I don't pretend that I know everything about this. I don't know all there is to know about LLMs. I couldn't build one from scratch myself right now. Not saying that I could. Maybe I'll learn more, and I would love to learn more, and that will help me change my mind. I'll update things, right? Maybe this stuff is scarier than I appreciate, but so far, nobody has given me any good reason to think that these terrible things are coming in the ways that Nate and Hank are talking about in this conversation. And I'm not going to go from not having any good reasons and ignorance to being terrified of ASI. Instead, I'm going to tell you the stuff that I do know, the stuff that I do understand, and nothing points in that direction to me. And then I'm going to admit that there's more that I have to learn about the subject. And I hope that you'll do the same. And I hope that I've reflected at least some of that humility in this video. Sometimes my anger and frustration may have me be like overconfident and appear that I know more than I do here. I hope I haven't overplayed that hand. Third principle. you should distrust large, powerful, influential people and companies, especially folks that have things to gain by what they're saying. And this is, to me, again, the real realignment bit, right? I am not confident that my interests and your interests watching this video are aligned with OpenAI's or Sam Altman's. But I am confident that a lot of these intellectual luminaries who are pushing stuff about artificial intelligence stand a lot to gain if the things that they're saying are true, right? Like Nate and Eliezer have been making, like, they published a book on this. They're getting invited on Hank Green's show. They're getting invited on Ezra Klein's show. They're making media tours. They're writing books. They're going to be asked into like political discussions with Peter Thiel, whoever, in part because of the things that they're saying. Now, that doesn't mean that they are wrong, right? I just did a fallacy video about ad hominem, circumstantial ad hominem. So I don't want to commit a circumstantial ad hominem here and say they stand to gain something, so they're wrong. But the fact that they stand so much to gain does give us reason to take it with a grain of salt, a pile of salt, lots of salt. Okay. Fourth pillar, I hope that what we are doing, what I'm doing with analyzing this story, what I'm doing with anything I do in life, is being kind to others and promoting human flourishing, which is, I guess, sort of the flip side to what I just said, right? Like, I don't trust that these large companies have our best interests at heart, but I would like whatever goes on to push our best interests. I hope I've shown that to Hank in this video. I hope that all of you have gotten some benefit from it, and like there's a kindness to be found there. But we should be thinking about, in the design of LLMs, in the design of these technologies, are these things that are promoting human flourishing and kindness and making the world better? And if they're not, how can we change and fix things to make the world better? One part to go. I gave my opening on how I think about Hank Green. I've given a lot of details about things I thought was bad about that video and issues that I had. And then I talked about my 4 pillars. And then finally, here's just my closing note, specifically to Hank. Thank you for watching this video, Hank. I appreciate you. I love your channel. But man, we needed to talk. Like, this was not good. And I've gone back and forth on this a few times. Like, I was like, oh, this is going to be great because I love this topic. And I saw your video and I was like, oh, it felt really bad. And I was starting to write my notes and they were super negative. I'm like, you know what? This is too mean. Like, this is just because I'm a thin-skinned philosopher and you guys laughed about philosophy a few times. But the more that I think about it, and on the 3rd and 4th time watching your video, I am really upset. And here's why. The conversation that you had, like, at a bar with Nate, where you're just like, you know, shooting the breeze and you're like, this is a hard issue and it means a lot. It's interesting. Let's just chop it up and talk about it. Like, I think your conversation would have been fine in that case. There were a bunch of reasoning errors and problems with it, but I don't mind you having that conversation. I think we all should. As someone who works in tech and with artificial intelligence, I have conversations with people all the time where they're like, hey, what do you think about AI? I think it's going to ruin the world. And we have a conversation, right? And that's fine. And I speak glibly and, I'm not overly critical of them, that sort of stuff. I don't want to be judgy there. But, and this is why I got angry again, and I think I feel more justified in criticizing you. You didn't just have a conversation with Nate Soares. You had a conversation on a wildly popular YouTube channel that, like, north of 2.5 million people are subscribed to. So many people are watching this and consuming it. And you are not just someone having this conversation, in the same way that, like, someone like Joe Rogan is just crazy popular, so they had to talk about anything, but Joe Rogan will talk about anything, and we know he's not qualified for most of it. You're a science guy. You're a tech guy. You talk about whether conspiracy theories about aliens are appropriate or not, or whether we think that there's tricks of the camera. You talk about the economics bubble in ways that are credible, and you've built up that credibility over time. Which is why when I see a video that's got some, like, fear-mongering in it, that is totally unsubstantiated and unclear, I just think there's a bar of responsibility to being accurate and careful and clear, and you didn't meet it. And you are someone who I hold to that standard and still will on your videos going forward. And so you got some work to do. I'm happy to talk anytime, or like off the record, whatever you like. I don't want this to just be like I'm just criticizing, and hopefully the stuff that I said above was constructive enough to help you and help others get my take on the situation. But I want to be part of the solution. So how can we push back against some of this fear mongering and think clearly about stuff, and not just to think clearly about, oh, is ASI scary or not? But as I said, I think there's a lot of stuff that really is scary here. And those are mostly people, institutions, governments, large companies that are being exploitative, maybe going to ruin stuff in the economy, and building tools that are not working for people, but are rather like taking stuff from people. We need to be clear about who and where the problem lies, rather than getting into hand wavy, unclear stuff where we're just worried about some sci-fi scenario that I just don't think holds any water at this point. Thank you, Hank. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, Wit, for suggesting this video. This has been a new structure for me. I don't think I've gone on crazy long rants like this before. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop below in the comments if you have any thoughts. Do you like these kind of videos? You want me to do more? Were there any topics in there, like especially on the rationality stuff, that you want me to expand on? Happy to do it. I, I was angry at the start, and like this was good. I feel good. I can breathe. I got this stuff off my chest, and now I just have a lot of editing to do. But after that, I'm really looking forward to see what you guys have to say. Thanks so much. Be kind, everybody. I'll see you next time.